everybody, and welcome to Through the Veil. I'm Elle.
I'm Camille.
Today, I'm really excited. We're going to be interviewing Camille, and she's going to share with us her story and all of her experiences that kind of opened her eyes and brought her to where she's at. So I know we've already kind of mentioned in the previous episodes, Camille lost her son about 6 years ago. And we know that's a huge turning point, obviously, in your life, right, Camille? But were there experiences that maybe you had earlier on before that that kind of brought the spirit world within touching distance for you?
There were some, definitely Wesley's passing opened up my awareness to the extent of the connection that was possible with people on the other side. But before he died, I had some things happen. Like, for example, when I was 9, I had the chicken pox. And when you get it, like when you're younger, it's not as bad. But being 9, I wasn't like terrible, but it was still worse. My brother and I had it at the same time. He was 5. And I remember they were just everywhere. And I was in so much pain and I was really fussy. And it was like so hard not to scratch. My mom was like, don't scratch, but I didn't know what else to do, you know? I remember one day I'm laying in bed and I'm crying and I'm scratching and I'm just like fussing. I'm being dramatic. I'm all by myself. My mom has left me in there. And I hear a voice just out of nowhere kind of whisper shout at me. And
Whisper
it said,
It
quiet,
happens.
like just be quiet. It was just like quiet. And it was kind of like a shock and awe experience where I was so surprised to hear a voice in my room. And I knew I was sick. And so, you know, when you're sick, your brain's kind of fuzzy, but I was able to put together that wasn't my mom. Somebody just told me to be quiet. They're kind of scolding me, but in a loving way, basically saying, if you would just calm yourself down, this experience wouldn't be so miserable for you. So I did. And I was just laying there and I quieted down and I did start to feel better. Um, it was like somebody on the other side was just like, I need to go tell her. Somebody needs to tell her. I'm going to,
What a funny experience for them to jump in on, right?
they're
It's
just
like
like, we can't handle
too much
this.
crying. Calm it down.
Who's going to tell her? So that was when I was 9. And I always just chalked it up to there was an angel in my room telling me to be quiet, trying to help me feel better um, in a sharp way. So it was interesting.
Sharp
And
but
then,
loving,
yeah,
right?
loving but sharp. Oh, okay. And then when I was like 14, I was leaving high school and there was a crosswalk. My mom would pick me up on the other side of the street. So I was crossing the street and I heard a voice just telling me to stop. And it was really strong. And I couldn't see any cars coming. Like there was no visible reason why I needed to stop. But because this voice like shocked me again, I completely halted in my path. And then no, that's less than like 2 seconds later, a sports car like zoomed down the street. And I didn't have visibility because there was a van that was parked that was like turning into the parking lot, turning left. And the big van was blocking my view. And so I thought that everything was clear and there's no crossing guards. It's high school. I guess I don't, that's more of a 2000s thing to have crossing guards. We didn't have any. You're just kind of on your
Yeah.
own.
Just don't die.
Yeah.
Common sense.
Survival of the fittest. So I had that voice tell me to stop. And if I hadn't stopped, I would have been hit by that car. And it was a student and they were speeding. They were going like 40 and a 25, you know? So that would have been really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
My
those were
sister-in-law just actually had that very same experience happen to her
your
like
sister-in-law?
2 days ago. Yep.
Oh, tell us
Yeah.
what happened.
She, the very same thing. Like she was crossing the street, um, getting ready to cross the street, completely deserted. There was like nobody on the whole street. She had her stroller with her little baby and her little 2-year-old. And she heard this feeling say, back up. And it was overwhelming. Like she couldn't even handle it. She doesn't even remember how she got backed up. But less than 2 seconds later, this car came going 50 and a 25 and blew right through that intersection. So, heaven, thank those angels.
Right.
Mind crosswalks.
Yeah. Sometimes the errand of angels is like, we need to get in there and like damage control, you know? Like
Right?
it's not just like harps playing. Sometimes it's like, stop right now. So
Right. Yeah. And I've heard so many stories of people having protection in ways like that. So that's really fun. You didn't get smushed. You got
yeah,
saved.
still here. And then I remember my grandma, so she passed away when I was in my late 20s. And we had this family before the service, like a family time to sit and just share memories, right? More
Right.
casual. And my cousins were getting up and talking about all these amazing times I had going to spend time with her because they all lived local to where she was in Idaho. And I grew up in California. And so I was thinking, gosh, like I didn't really get a lot of time with her. We'd see her maybe once a year. And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't get that much time with her and I felt left out. And as I had that thought, it was like my grandma was sitting next to me and she put this little thought into my brain that said, now I can spend as much time with you as I want. I can be with you all the time. I can go where you go. And it was kind of like when I had my chickenpox experience. Like my brain was just sort of, I was emotional and it was like a heavy moment, like being there. I mean, mourning her death, but also celebrating her life. There's still heaviness. And
Right.
I didn't really question it. I was just like, I guess my grandma can talk to me right now. And I just went with it.
She just died. It's normal, right?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. I was sitting there crying and I was just like, okay, grandma, like, thank you. Um, I didn't
I feel
really,
like it is usually more acceptable when someone has just passed. People don't tend to question it as much. It's like, no, people have things like this happen, right? Like this
yeah,
is when it happens, right?
yeah. And then I was like, well, while we're talking, if you're really here, I have a question for you. So I can't remember. I asked her, I was struggling with something at the time and I asked her a question and she gave me a little bit of advice and then she was gone. And I was just like, okay,
Oh.
well, thanks, grandma. Thank you. It was really sweet. And then when I was actually pregnant with my son Wesley, who passed away, one of my best friends from growing up, her mom, who was like a second mom to me, I was there at their house after school, like all the time, and would sleep over at their house all the time, and even went on trips with their family. Um, our families would do trips together. She passed away unexpectedly from the flu. Before this was
Oh
pre-COVID.
man.
hmm She had pneumonia because of the flu, and it was so devastating. It rocked the world of our church community, the families that were close to this family. It was really such a shock. And I was in this state of, I was so perplexed after she died. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand the spirit world. I wanted to understand what was she doing over there?
Right.
What was so important, to take her out of her family? She was in her 50s. She was pretty young. So I was just like, why, what, how, all these questions. And I had a dream one night after praying a lot for understanding. And we were back in the cultural hall of the church building that we had gone to growing up. It's this like historical building built in the 1950s, I think, in Newport Beach, California. And we're standing in this church gym. There's all these people standing around that we know that Lisa has passed away, but we're expecting her to show up somehow. So we're standing around and like different groups of people are chatting and we're waiting for her to come because we know she's going to come visit us. And some people in this gym are like looking down at the ground and they're sad and they're just in grief. And some of them don't even really think she's going to be there and they're just feeling really sad. And other people are excited and waiting for her to come. But there's this one guy and he's standing in the middle and he's tall and he's like waving his hand like, Lisa, I'm right here. Like, I'm right here. I'm ready for you to come. And so she shows up in the corner of the room and she walks straight to the guy who's like waving and excited, like, pick me first, I'm here. And she walks straight up to him and they're just having like a friendly conversation, like, it's so good to see you. And then she makes her way to all the people in that church gym that are standing there and waiting to see her and expecting to and excited. All the people that were like, she's just not here. She didn't go to those people. And maybe not because she didn't want to, but because they weren't ready to receive. They couldn't
Yeah,
have
how
experienced
symbolic.
her. Yeah. And that was the dream. And it was so powerful. I was just like,
So did
okay.
you understand that at the moment? Like when you had that dream, you woke up with this understanding of,
I woke up and the wheels were turning and I wrote it down and I was like, okay, this is what happened. This is what I think it means. And I'm trying to listen to the spirit for confirmation. So I'm putting it together. If
Mhm.
we want experiences with people on the other side, we have to believe that it's possible and have a level of expectation, like, and kind of positive thinking, like, I'm here and I'm ready for whenever you want to talk to me,
Right.
which is
Yeah,
hard. That's
like
kind of,
literally be open to it, literally be
yeah,
waiting for it, watching for it,
yeah. And it's kind of a
jumping
paradox
up and down with
because
your hands in the air.
right here,
Be that guy.
yeah, it's kind of a paradox because it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel those feelings. But on the other hand, when you're ready to connect, it requires like a next level of faith.
Right. Yeah, I've found in my practice that the most helpful thing is really just understanding that they're not gone. They're always there. Like literally always they're around us all the time. It's
Yeah.
just a shift of perception. It's just looking left instead of looking right, right? It's just a matter of turning your attention really most of the time.
Right. And there's duality in it too. You can also, in one hand, be say, I'm grieving, this is so hard. But on the other hand, say, I'm still keeping my eyes open spiritually
Right.
for these experiences.
And I think, I mean, I've dealt with a lot of grief. My grief, other people's grief. Um, and I feel like one of the main defining factors of it is grief makes you turn inward, right? Grief,
Hmm.
it kind of is numbing to a great deal for a lot of people. And sometimes in the middle of that grief, it can be so overwhelming, that black tide, that
Mm.
you can't look out for a bit. And that's okay. I feel like that's okay. You have to
Yeah.
naturally process before. And perhaps, I mean, I can't speak for your friend because I don't know if she experienced anything with her mother,
Yeah,
but
she has.
oftentimes in the moment, people are wondering, like when they're experiencing just after a loss, people are like, why do I not feel anything? Why do I feel not feel connected to them? And a lot of times it's just because that grief needs to be processed first. You just have to move through it before you can you can even begin to be sensitive to those things
Right.
again.
Right. And I think this experience happened like within a few months after she passed away.
Right.
It wasn't like the next day, right? That
Yeah.
shock and that grief, you have to pass through that, like you said. So it was some time after. I think it helps too. And I've wondered about this correlation that people that have maybe people do better with grief if they have familiarity with how do I like processing emotions and how thoughts that we hold on to can affect our emotions. And they've done some like work with maybe therapy or life coaching or some type of self
Right.
help to be able to know what to do with heavy thoughts and how to handle them or how to like tools, just more tools, right?
Yeah. How to
So,
transform them instead of letting them just weigh on you.
right. Right, because when
Yeah.
I was after I graduated from college, I didn't know what to do with my career. I was a sociology major. There's not really like a clear path when you graduate in sociology. It's like how to get
Major.
out, how to get a piece of paper that says I graduated from college. And I care
Like being
about
an
the world.
English major.
Yeah.
I
So
graduated in English. What can I do with that?
I know there's so many things. So I went back to school to be a life coach. And I think that understanding that the thoughts that we hold on to and that we really connect with and believe affect the feelings that we hold on to and believe. And so if you can find the root thought that's bothering you and make sure that it's a healthy thought that you want to keep, that you want to hold on to, then that really helps with grief. It's something that I used a lot later when my son passed away.
There's a lot of people, there's been a lot of studies with that with science that have proved that is how our brain works into our body. It becomes a holistic
Oh,
sense. Like Joe
absolutely.
Dispenza is huge with that whole like mentality where like your thoughts become your emotions get stuck in your body, and then that interprets how your experience is, like your existence is. It becomes a health condition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
completely,
like
it
the
has a
the
huge
body keeps
effect.
the score is that book that
Exactly.
gets
Yeah,
so
like
much
body
attention
keeps
right
the
now.
score.
I found it all immensely helpful for myself and was able to work with clients on their thoughts and feelings as well and coaching them through it. So I had like that was I think of something that was really important for me, especially with having a son that was going to pass away, to be able to have some skills and tools because otherwise it would
Right.
have maybe been insurmountable for me. I don't know.
I know.
Um,
It's funny how
so
those things get prepared in advance, right?
right, right. Yeah. And I did want to say though, so with my friend's mom who passed, Lisa, I had another dream with her once where she was just welcoming me to her house. It was like she never passed and we were just hanging out and she was teasing me in the dream. And that was my first experience with somebody on the other side where it wasn't just like, this is a spiritual message. It was like just fun and lighthearted and more casual and like funny. And so I realized that our experiences with people on the other side don't always have to be the solemn, like
Right.
memorial or something. It can just be life, like how they work.
I think
So I
that
was like,
happens a lot, and that might be one of the reasons people don't necessarily like maybe put credibility to them. It's because it's like, oh well, that was just silly. It's like,
yeah,
well, they are still who they are. Like
right,
just their past doesn't mean they're now in sainthood.
right.
It's like if they
Yeah,
had a sense of humor, often they have a great sense of humor afterwards, right? So it doesn't
yeah,
change who they are or how they would have acted, really, just to pass from life to afterlife.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, she was teasing me about something that I was currently doing in my life, like with work related, and she was teasing me because I worked like long hours, and she was like, just she would always tease me if I worked too hard. She's like, Camille, you need to relax, you need to have fun, because she knew me when I was in high school, and I was like, I gotta get straight A's, and she was always just like, oh, just have fun and relax. You don't need to be so stressed out. So it was fun for her to like come back into my life in such a way, you know?
Hmm. Would you say that that dream, so I think it's a valuable thing to talk about the difference between like visitation dreams and regular dreams because they're they're separate things. Just
Yeah.
because you've seen somebody past in a dream state doesn't necessarily mean that that was them connecting with you. But
Okay,
often
that's a
visitation
good point.
dreams will have a very specific sort of feeling to them. Like they will be
Hmm.
maybe disconnected from other things. They won't maybe seem quite as random. Or like,
Yeah.
dreams can get
This
real
one was
random,
more of a
right?
lucid dream. It felt like real life, like it
Right.
was an actual visitation dream.
Exactly. And that
Yeah.
is a difference I wanted to point out here is that oftentimes they will have a different level of gravity to them. It's like
Hmm.
you can feel them, like they were just with me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is a big indicator that this was something more real than just your subconscious going, let's just dink around and create some fun stuff to experience while we're
Yeah.
sleeping.
Yeah. That's a good point too, because after my son passed, I've had some dreams with him. Most of them are like really great, but sometimes I'm like, that was just my subconscious thinking around. Like that was not,
Right.
and sometimes they're less than helpful. I was like, that was a bad dream with
Yes.
my son in it. And I didn't
And
appreciate that.
I would like to point that out too. Like I have a friend, a young lady, and she lost her mother 2 years ago. And the dreams that she's had since then, sometimes she'll like mention to people, like at church or in other settings, like, I had a dream about my mom last night. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you. Like, I hope that was so healing. And don't you know that she loves you so much? And of course, she'd want to like come back to you in a dream or something. I feel like we give more credence to like dream visitations than anything else.
100% because we're not in control.
Yeah.
We're passed out and it like comes
Right.
to
So
us. It happens
of
to
course
us.
they're more natural that way. Of course they're
Yeah.
more real if it happens that way, which is not true. But this really struck her as devastating to her because these dreams weren't positive dreams with her mother. They were entirely her subconscious mind playing through the what ifs, what could have happened, what could I have changed, what could I have done better before she died, what could
Yeah.
she be thinking about me now, kind of things. This was completely anxiety, brought up in her subconscious that she was working through and processing through. And it really disturbed her for quite a long time. And we had several conversations about it and reassurances that, not every time you see your loved one doesn't mean that they were coming to visit you.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's just us working through our things, and that's okay too. They're both
Yeah.
okay. Both of them happen. So
Right.
I think that's worth mentioning too.
I agree. And then you were talking about your friends saying things at church. That reminded me. I wanted to say when I was in my early 20s, I was at church. There was a testimony meeting. There was this young lady who was bearing her testimony about having experiences with spirits through the other side of the veil. And I was kind of, even though I'd had a couple myself, I was sort of just like, why is she talking about this at church? This is weird. Like, this isn't like a normal testimony thing. Like, she didn't mention the Book of Mormon. This is when I was more like type A, judgmental member of the church, member of my church. She didn't mention, she's just talking about having experiences with spirits. Like, this is a little weird. Why is she so open about these? And so I remember I went to out the hall to get a drink of water and I was kind of judging her. I'm like, I feel like this is uncomfortable. Why does she feel like she needs to share this with us? And then I was like, I don't even know. Like, I haven't had these experiences, even though I had. This was before I had the experience with my grandma. I was just like, she's so open about it. It felt a little strange. And that version of me would be completely judging myself now because I just hadn't
For
had those
sharing it.
experiences yet. I didn't know what was
Well,
possible.
you think about it though, how did her sharing that fundamentally transform, like in a small way? It's all stepping stones, right? It's small
Totally.
things. If we're a closed book, it's things that begin to crack that
Yeah.
that binding, right? Crack us open to be able to access everything inside. So she shared that with you. It stuck with you. It worked in your mind. It worked in
Yeah.
your subconscious in such a way that you process it. And later, when you have an experience like that, you're like, oh,
I'm the
probably
weird
this
one
is
now,
okay.
too. It's
Right?
fine.
Like, no, I can share mine from the pulpit.
Yeah,
Not
but
really,
it was
but
good for me. I wasn't as open-minded as I am now. So that was really good
right,
for
but
me.
it was a building stone along the pathway to you becoming to this point now where I don't know, maybe if you hadn't had all of those small experiences when it came crunch time, really time that those experiences were necessary for your own maybe mental health or
Mhm.
healing journey, it could have been that you would have ignored them or wouldn't have been open to them because you hadn't had these small, small inclinations on the way, right?
Yeah.
So,
So that leads us to my son passing away. It was 2018. Wesley was 3, almost 4. He, a bolt had gotten loose from his toddler bed and fallen out onto the floor. He was playing with it and it got lodged in he was put it in his mouth. It got lodged in his throat. He came running out. I knew he was choking. I didn't know what on. He kind of ran me back to his room and pointed, and I saw that there was no bolt. He like was showing me. 911 was called right away. On paper, he should have survived. There was a first responder that got there within a minute. Police officer was holding him while the ambulance was coming. He was tracking his breathing. He was still breathing.
so he was able to get air through that airway.
A little bit, yeah. And then he stopped breathing. The police officer said, like, okay, at 10:13 is when he stopped breathing. And then the ambulance was there within a minute and a half. They started working on him, doing chest compressions. They got the bolt out. They life flighted him to the hospital just, to be safe. And he passed away. Well, my husband and I both strongly felt that he passed away in the police officer's arms. As soon as his body stopped breathing, that's when his spirit left. Even though, like medically speaking, a child or a person can live,
Yeah.
survive without
Yeah.
breathing
Six
for
to
a
10 minutes
couple.
without air.
Thank you. So, I mean, on paper, he should have survived, but he didn't. He wasn't supposed to. I was at his funeral, and the spirit was like, this date has been in the calendar for a long time. This was the date of his
Yeah.
funeral. So, we even had a first responder come to our house and visit us a few months later and say, we were all in shock. He was the one in the ambulance before they sent him on the life flight.
Right.
We were in shock. We were high-fiving each other. We thought we'd saved his life. We don't know. We don't understand.
What happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And I just said, we felt like it was his time and it doesn't make sense, but that was the plan.
Right.
Um, so we went to the hospital to like have time with his body, and I just felt Wesley's spirit present with us in the room. I felt his spirit like with me for like the next solid few days. He was just always with me and comforting me. I felt him just loving on me. He was just a really sweet spirit. And if you had like looked at all of my children and said which one of these kids would go back to heaven early because they don't even really like, they're just so pure, it would obviously be Wesley. Like that was just no
Yeah.
questions asked. He was just a really special spirit, full of love, very mature for his age. He had friendships with like the lady that came to clean our house twice a month. They were little best buddies, and she ended up speaking at the funeral because we're like, he and Marizzi were friends. They had conversations the week before he passed. She was over at our house and he was like, Marizzi, where's your mom live? And she was like, oh, she lives in heaven. And he was like, can you tell me about heaven? And she was like, it's beautiful. The streets are paved with gold and everyone wears white and it's so pretty and everyone's so nice. And he was like, I want to go to heaven. And she was like, yeah. And he said, I want to go to heaven today. And she was like, no, Wesley, you want to stay here and be with your family. But he's like, well, I want to go to heaven and be with Jesus. And she's like, not now, Wesley. And it was just this conversation that didn't feel like it was just happenstance after it happened.
Right.
So anyway, he was just a special little boy who touched people's hearts. And he stayed with me. Like his spirit was just with me. And it was so easy to have that connection with him. And I could even, for days after he passed away, weeks, I would feel this hole in my heart because I just wanted to be with him so badly
Right.
that at night before I went to bed, I couldn't fall asleep until I had felt his spirit. So I would just kind of sit there and I would wait and I would just talk to him in my mind and say, Wesley, I really need you to come visit me right now because I just can't fall asleep without feeling you. Like I feel
I need to know
so
you're there.
incomplete. Yeah. And he would come. He was really reliable. And then I started to get a little bit more like used to not being with him. Cause it's like, have you ever been on a really long trip and you come back and you're so excited to see your kids? It was like that, but I didn't actually get to see him. So it's like this
Yeah.
missing ache. And so I kind of got used to it more and more. So I wouldn't ask him every night to come visit me. And I started to feel like that connection we had wasn't as close. And I was starting to get worried, like, oh my gosh, is it true? Now he's going to be gone doing some mission on the other side of the veil. And like, he's not going to be around us anymore. Because that's kind of part of like the folklore I've heard at church is when people
Mm.
pass away, they have this special mission. And, so I was gifted, I wish I could show you guys, bring it out later. There's a picture that we had somebody commissioned for our family. It's a sketch of Wesley. So she took a picture of him, and she sketched something off of the picture, and she has this gift of capturing the spirit of the individual that she's drawing. Her name's Jean Keaton, and I went to her website to look at, just learn more about her. And she had an experience when she was drawing once. There was a boy who had passed away, and she's drawing his picture, and she felt his spirit come to her, and he said, "Tell my mom that when she has random thoughts that just show up about me, and she starts thinking about me out of nowhere, that's me coming to visit her to say hi."
Mhm.
And so this artist told the mom that, because the mom had said, like, I prepare ahead of time for birthdays and death anniversaries and Christmas, and I know that it's going to be a hard day without my child, but it's those random times when he just pops into my head that catch me off guard where I get emotional. And Jean said to her, that's when he's
You
trying
know
to tell
he's
you
there.
that he's with you. Yeah. And so I realized that throughout the day, I'd have lots of experiences where I'm folding my laundry and I'm not thinking about Wesley at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, little ping, like just thoughts about him. And I started to realize, like, I can have more experiences with him than just one. Those times
Right.
where I
Just one
feel
type.
him. Yeah, there's more than one type. I can feel him in my heart. That's like, that clear sentience, like I'm feeling this experience with him, versus when he's, he's coming into my mind. That's a visitation too. It's just different.
Right. It's a different kind. And that's something that I will frequently tell people in things when we sit down together, when we connect to their loved ones through the veil. And they're like, "Well, are they are they around me?" And I'm like, "You know the answer to that question, don't you?" Um, Oftentimes, I feel like our logical mind, it's really easy just to write it off, be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I was just suddenly remembering that time." But if you didn't have any trigger, any indicator to like push you towards that memory, why would you think of that memory randomly? Why would you think, "Oh, grandma would have told me this in this situation," or "Oh, mom would have done this in this situation," you know? And those are the moments where they touch on us. And our spirit recognizes that. Because
Yeah.
they're in spirit, we have a spirit, inside of this body. And our spirit they recognize them, it touches on them, and our mind reflects what our spirit experiences. And so those are totally, I mean, that's one of my favorite things to help people realize. And if you pay really close attention, oftentimes when those thoughts come to you, you can feel that person next to you. Most people have that ability of sensitivity to some extent. And so I think it's one of the things that I encourage people most to think about when those things suddenly come to them. So it's really great that you realized that with Wesley.
Well, I was in so much sadness until I realized that. I was like, he doesn't want to visit me anymore. Like, I wrote this song. So after he died on a Monday, and we did his funeral the following Saturday. On Wednesday, I woke up and I just had this, like, these words come playing through my mind. I was just thinking about him, and I said, "Oh, sweet boy." And then this melody started playing through my mind. And I am a singer songwriter, but like I don't always just have songs just given to me like
Right.
that. But I had a whole song written by the afternoon, and I called it Wesley Song. And I felt the spirit was like, "You're supposed to sing this at the funeral." And I was like, "My son just died, and you want me to go like put a song together for Saturday? Like that's a big ask, you know?" But I
Yeah.
did feel like I was supposed to, and that was the reason the song was given to me. So I sang this song at his funeral, and one of the lines I wrote was, it says, "Don't you know that there's a God above? He's forevermore right here beside me, for he's my son and God is love." And I wrote those lines like, he's forevermore right here beside me, like God is forevermore right here beside me, and Wesley is forevermore right here beside me. Because I wrote it when I was feeling him like right with me all the time. And so I started to feel really sad, like he's not with me anymore, or he's really hard to feel. And that made me sad. But then I realized, like, he's touching in every day I'm having thoughts about him. Maybe
Right.
he's not having to put forth as much energy to say, like, "Mom, I'm here. I love you." It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know, but he's still really actually here, and he's still trying to tell that to me, but it's in a different way. And I need to pay attention, and I need to be aware of that. Okay. So then 3 days after Wesley died, my mother-in-law passed away. My husband's mom passed away from heart failure. And we knew she'd been sick for a long time. We just weren't expecting her to actually die like the same week as Wesley, right? So there was a lot of emotions around that. And you know, people will ask me, like, how do you know it's the spirit of that person visiting you? Like when you feel somebody from the other side, it's like, how do you
Right.
deny it? it's their personality. Like I can't manufacture my mother-in-law Kathy's personality. She's a very unique person. She's not like really spunky. She's really determined. She's
Right.
very animated. Like nobody else could be Kathy but Kathy, you know? So I remember her visiting me once when I was in the temple, and she said something to me that only Kathy would say. And she she said, it's not going to be as bad as you think. But in a comforting way, you know? And I was like, thanks. And she's like, no, it's really not going to be as bad. Like Wesley's death, it feels like the worst thing right now, but it's not going to be the future, and moving on is not going to be as bad as you think.
Right.
So she was kind of comforting me in a tough love way, but that was her personality. And she can get away with it because I know it's not out of love.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because you knew her.
yeah, I knew her.
That's
And
that's a
yeah,
great thing to point out. Thank you for mentioning that point that we know it's them because we recognize them. We recognize who they are because we know them and they know
right,
us. So they don't change. They're still who they are. They're still made of the same substance, just as
right,
if they were sitting in the room with you physically, except
right.
not physically.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been times where I'm talking to Wesley as well, and I'm feeling him, and he's coming in, and I guess I've had that question in my head, like, am I relying too much on communicating with these people on the other side versus like I'm still a prayerful person. I pray every day. I have, a relationship with God, Heavenly Father. Um, I have a separate relationship with Jesus. I have a separate relationship with Heavenly Mother. They're like, key players in my life. But I do like to talk to my people on the other side a lot. And it was interesting because one time I was having a bad day. I was talking to Wesley about it. I felt him come to me while I'm driving in my car, and his sweet little spirit said, "Have you prayed about this? Like, go talk to Heavenly Father. Jesus knows how you feel. Like, have you talked to them about this?" And I actually already had, but he's like kind of pushing me to do it again. It's
Right.
like it's a good messenger when they're bringing you back to the source.
Exactly. Yeah,
So anyway,
exactly.
that was sweet. But my mother-in-law, she's like a really animated, kind of energetic, can be really kind of a feisty person, but in a fun way. So she came to me. I felt her spirit one time, and she came to me and said, "I want you to tell," and it was her husband, that he's doing great. And I'm like, I was driving in my car because I'm all by myself. It's quiet, and that's when
Well, you're
spirit spoke.
also like I think the car or the shower, anything that you're
Mhm.
doing like autonomously, where it's
Right,
automatic, it's not
autopilot.
causing you to have to focus. You can become aware of those things more easily. I think it's a good place for those things to happen. It's always the shower with me. It's always the
Hmm.
shower. It's my place.
Yeah, maybe I just need to take longer, more relaxing showers. I have had experiences in the
Or
shower.
drives.
Mine are
Longer, more relaxing
drives
drives.
often. Yeah. Now that I'm piecing it together. Anyway, yeah.
Mine,
So I'm
spirit
in the
talks to me in the shower and God talks to me in the car.
yeah.
Right.
So she
Hmm.
shows up and she's like, "Hey, tell him that he's doing great." And I was like, "I'm not going to tell him that. That's so weird."
Just suddenly out of the blue. Just so
I'm
you
like,
know.
"I can't that's weird. I'm not going to be able to do that." So I wanted to, but I didn't say anything to him until like a year and a half later. And I was like, "Oh, by the way,
You're doing great.
you were doing great a year and a half ago. Just wanted to let you know." But I had an experience where she came to me another time and she wanted me to say something to one of her daughters. And she was very, very insistent. Like she wouldn't like leave my side until I promised her I would do it that night. And so I
Hmm.
did. Because my sister-in-law was living with us at the time. So it was just like she really needed me to send a message, and she was like relying on me to do it. And she was like, you need to tell her. And like, I'm like cleaning my countertops actually. So I was cleaning this time. I wasn't in my car, but I was also in autopilot, right? I'm not like thinking about it. I'm just like wiping down my countertops. And she shows up and she's like, "I need you to tell her this message." And so I did. And I felt relieved when I did because I knew she wasn't going to be like stalking me anymore to make sure I did it.
The pressure lets up
A
slowly.
lot of
I've
pressure.
had that. I've had so many experiences, especially early on, where I didn't mention it and like the guilt.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
why I
but
finally
I'm glad
sent
you
the
did.
message to Jeff's dad because I was like, because we were kind of already talking about her and times where we felt her. And I was like, "Oh, by the way, a year and a half ago."
Got this for you. Hope
Yeah,
that it's still
sorry.
applicable to your life.
Sorry about that. Um, but you know what? I realized that I wasn't such a weirdo when I read, was it an LDS Living magazine? It was a story about Elder Richard G. Scott. He's a
I
leader
love
in our
him.
church. Yeah,
He's my favorite.
he's awesome. And he was talking about his wife passed away. Her name's Janine, and he had day-to-day experiences where she would show up and say, Richard, is it really a good idea for you to be eating that piece of cake? Because like, like he's got to be careful. He's an older guy. I don't know what health problems he had, but she was like, is that really a good idea for you to have that extra piece of cake? And he was just like, they had these conversations back and forth, and it was casual and it was natural and it was ongoing.
Yeah,
So
and that's exactly how spirit communication works, right? It's not crazy or mystic or, like angels singing on high to experience it. And most of the time,
yeah.
it's very simple. It's very casual. And that you made a point earlier that I want to hit back on because I think it's really important. A lot of people are like, well, why don't you like pray? Are you like worshiping these people? Are you venerating these people through communicating? It's no, no, no. Like there is a defined line between God and
Yeah.
spirits in the spirit world. They're not the same thing, and you're not doing the same thing. There's no worshipful behavior going on because you're communicating with them. You're not breaking any lines here. This
Yeah.
is merely communication. That's all it is. You're having a conversation with someone that you love. And
Hmm.
that's the most natural thing in the world. These people want to talk to you and you want to talk to them, and you're just opening the doorway to that communication in ways other than using your mouth. So I think that's a really beautiful point to set forth because there's nothing unnatural about it at all. And of course, we still want to communicate with those people that we love, and they still want to communicate and be involved in our lives too. So even when it's something simple and silly like "Don't eat that cake; it's
Don't
bad
eat
for
that
your blood
cake.
sugar.
Right.
Stop
Well,
crying. Go to sleep."
I know, right? My cousin got married to a guy whose mom had recently passed away, and she was it her telling me the story or my mom was telling me the story that like so my cousin's father-in-law would have conversations with his wife through the veil where she would show up and he was hosting one time like a dinner party and she was like, oh, don't get those plates, get these ones, they're so much nicer. And don't
Yeah.
worry about because he would be like, well, they're cheaper. She's like, don't worry about the cost, just get these ones, they're better. Like she so I mean, and I was just really this
Still
was
running the
before Wesley
household from the
passed.
other side, running the household.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like, oh, I need to help you. I'm stepping in right now. I just was floored because I didn't know that these like casual, natural conversations were a possibility. And this was before Wesley passed, but I was still really intrigued with the spirit world because I'd lost my friend's mom at this point and my grandma. And I was just like, it can be as easy and simple as
Oh,
that.
yeah.
How do
Simplest thing in the
I
world.
want that. I want that kind of, ease with, of course, I think it requires you to lose somebody, maybe a fresh passing and somebody who's really, really close to you to even, um,
Open you up to that possibility.
yeah. Because I
I think
was,
so. I think most people, a lot of people, I hear so many stories of people who have been triggered into curiosity about the other side or awareness of these interactions that do happen with the spirit world because of a loss.
mhm,
And before that, it's like, why would you even be aware of that? Why would it even be necessary? Why would it be important to your life? But because you've experienced this loss, you've experienced the need, the pull through the veil to the other side, suddenly it's like, oh, this is an option. Like
yeah.
this exists. And then of
Yeah.
course it exists, right? It's the best thing to have happen because you really understand they're not anywhere. They're right here.
Mhm.
They're right here, just differently.
It's like that quote, I'm gonna butcher it, but it was a quote given at the funeral of an English clergyman that was really famous, and we can link it in show notes. Actually, this quote, but he talks about don't like talk about me like I'm somewhere far away. I'm just like I'm in. It's just like I'm in the next room.
Exactly.
Laugh like laugh with me like we always laughed. Talk to me like you always talk to me. Don't change and get super solemn just because I've passed away. It was such a beautiful quote. I love it. It just basically normalizes. I'm still here. I'm still the same. Let's continue our relationship the same.
Relationship.
Let's enjoy each other still.
Right. And that's not to minimize the grief either,
No.
right? Because that's a legitimate human experience. And
Yeah.
it's one of the most nuanced and difficult emotions that we can experience as physical
Yeah.
human beings and maybe even as spiritual human beings too.
I actually wrote a book. It's called Let the Angels Carry You: Coping and Connecting After Loved Ones Pass On. And there was a chapter I wanted to write about that quote, but it took me like a year to do it just because like I wrote other chapters first because I had a love-hate relationship with it. I
Yeah, of
loved it
course.
because yeah, I loved it, but I was like I hate this chapter because it makes it feel like, death is nothing. Oh, no, it's not nothing. Like it's devastating.
You can't minimize the loss of having someone physically with you and experience the things that you would have wanted them to, or that you expected to, or what you used to do with that person.
Every time I feel connected
Yeah,
to somebody on the other side, it feels like a miracle because it's like God's gift to us. It's a, it is, it's a spiritual gift
it's a
to
gift.
give us comfort. Yeah.
This is it's a pretty commonly held ideal, I think. Every time you go through something difficult, whether it's just a challenging experience or it is, something bigger than that, something harder than that, it's stretching, it's growing, in sometimes really uncomfortable ways. But ideally, we come out of that changed, hopefully changed for the better. But it's all about framing it and how it is. And that can sound like a trite thing to say when you're in the midst of something really painful. But at some point, those experiences shape us and shape what we are and who we become. And hopefully that is for the better. Hopefully we shift that and gear that and transform that into something that can push us forward and help us help other people and give back instead of just, you know, losing, instead of just
Yeah.
losing.
Right. And I just also want to say too that just because someone has incredible spiritual experiences with the other side doesn't take away that I'm still a human and I have to go
Right.
through the human emotions. Like I don't transcend being a human because I've had these experiences. I still feel
Exactly.
grief that pops out at me and anger. They say that the grief cycle is like anger, and eventually you make peace with it, you accept it. There's still going to be bouts with feeling angry. It's not like I've passed through anger on July 12th. I was done with anger and now I'm moving on. It's all kind of intercoiled. And there's still times where I just feel angry about my son's death and wish it wasn't the way it was, And
Right. You feel the
well,
loss.
right. Well, maybe I had an experience feeling him the day before that was beautiful. It's messy, being a human is
Life is
messy.
messy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the point.
Right.
There's not escaping that.
Yeah. Well, we took a break because
Sucks.
we have to do breaks for people that podcast with breaks. I found the picture of Wesley that Jean Keaton did. So there's a little bit of a glare on it, but she captured his little spirit in there, his like little spunk and his sweetness and his zest for life, all of it. It's all there. Isn't
I
she
love that
so
picture.
she's so gifted?
I also have to share that when I did a session with Camille many, many moons since, um, it's always really affirming and amazing to me to see that person that I was seeing. And I saw him just like that. I saw
Mm,
him with that smile, with that haircut, and
yeah.
it the light is totally there in his eyes in the picture. So I love that.
Yeah.
So good.
So special.
Different gifts manifest in different ways, right? Some people
Yeah.
can capture it on paper. Some people can see it in front of them. Some people hear it in their head.
Some people
Some
write
people have dreams.
songs. Some people
Yeah,
write
some
random
people write
songs that just
songs.
pop out of nowhere. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm writing songs, I honestly feel like I'm channeling them from the other side, like someone else on the other side is co-writing with me. They're like, here's the tune. Now let's see what you can do with it. And then I play with the tune and then they're like, okay. And then the thought of the next line comes into my head. And it's like, they're like, here you go. Like it really doesn't
That's
feel
amazing.
like I'm writing a song by myself. Like I'm writing with help from the other side. Like it's being given to me. It's like, and the channel that it's being given to me and the channel that we do all of this communication with is the Holy Ghost, right?
Right.
It's the same channel.
Right.
It's like this the Book of Mormon has a verse that says angels speak by the power of the Holy
Have the
Ghost.
Holy Ghost.
That's
Exactly.
how we're communicating. We're not doing this. It's already there. The channel exists. That's how, Richard Scott talked to his wife. It's through the Holy Ghost. That's how I feel
Right.
Wesley. It's through the Holy Ghost.
It's a
So,
spiritual capacity that we all have as spirit, sons and daughters of a divine heavenly Father. We're spirits in a human experience,
yeah,
right? That
right,
quote people always quote. It's true
right.
though, like the capacity that we have is already there, and
Mhm.
we access that, in the same way, in the same lane. It's all part of the same thing. Thank you, Camille, for sharing your story with us and sharing your path of growth. It's quite a vulnerable thing to put out for everyone to experience. So thanks for being
Anytime.
vulnerable with us today.
I'm an open book. So,
Literally are, because you wrote a book.
Well, and that too.
Next time, we'll be hearing from another friend who has had a couple experiences that are a little bit different. We'll be hopefully having my sister-in-law on, and she has a little bit of a different talent than we do. She has been certified in hypnotherapy as well as energy healing, and so she will bring a cool different experience to the podcast, I think, talking about how energy works and what it is and what it means, and also the mind, because who's not fascinated by the mind?
Yeah,
I
it's so
am.
interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah. All right, we're excited to share that with you guys, and we'll catch you next time.
All right, thanks for being here. Bye.
Thanks for being here. Bye.